Good morning, everyone, and welcome to December's masterclass. I'm Michaela Rini, and today we're going to be tackling something that you might hear quite a bit in your workplace. So maybe your team come to you with this question: can I have just 5 minutes? And in my experience, it never actually is 5 minutes, is it? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So that might sound a little bit like I'm complaining about people asking for help, but that's not at all what this is about. This isn't about being unhelpful or unsupportive. This is about the difference between developing your team and accidentally creating codependency or dependency on each other in the workplace. So, a quick little bit about me for those that are just joining us. Welcome back to anyone who's joined our masterclasses before. And if you're catching us on the replay, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon to you as well, whenever you're catching up. It is wonderful to have people joining us today. In December, can you believe it? We've done one of these sessions every month of the year except August when we had a summer break. So it is wonderful to be back. So for anyone who is new here, just a little bit about me. I'm Michaela Rini. I'm the founder of an organization called Opportunity Global. And I also run a TEDx event called TEDx Teesside. And I've actually been working in the learning and development space for nearly 17 years now. And in the last 15 years, I've been in various leadership roles in corporate, in SMEs, and in my own businesses too. And at Opportunity Global, me and my team, we've worked with over 10,000 leaders and managers in the last kind of 5 years across different sectors. But I think we really shine in high tech, engineering, and in manufacturing environments. But we also love working in other sectors too. But I think that's where we really can help people on the people stuff. So, one thing that I see, if I'm really honest, pretty much consistently across every organization is that very smart, very capable leaders who've accidentally trained their teams to stop thinking for themselves. And it's actually something that I believe is causing a lot of stress and a lot of exhaustion for everyone in teams. So today, we're going to talk about a really simple framework and a couple of ideas and questions that will help you fix that so that you have more people coming to you when they've got ideas of how to solve problems rather than always coming to you for the solution. That's the idea. I'll also share the link afterwards for our other masterclasses in the series in case you want to catch up on those too. And so, yeah, we're going to get started and dive straight in to the conversation, which is very exciting. So, just a quick reality check on all things delegation, getting this question, the 5 minute trap of being asked, what can I just have 5 minutes? Maybe you've heard that. Maybe it's just me. We'll see. But picture this. You are starting your day. You're trying to focus on that strategic project that only you can do. You've got that plan, that priority of what you want to deliver that day. And you know that maybe this project, this work has maybe been on your list for a little while, and you really want to dig into it and do that deeper work today. And then it starts. Can I just run this by you? Do you have 5 minutes? What do you think I should do about X, Y, Z? And before you know it, your morning is gone. Maybe even your afternoon ends up getting all chopped up because you're having these kind of 5 minute catch ups and conversations and the Teams messages and all of these different things coming in at you. And that strategic work that you set out in the morning to get done, it's still sitting there untouched. Does that sound familiar to anyone who's joined us? Has this maybe ever happened to you before? And let's be honest, that sometimes being that kind of go-to person, being everyone's person they go to for questions, for support in an organization, it can feel like really bloody amazing, doesn't it? You feel needed, you feel important, maybe, like you're adding value, like you're helping people, you're supportive, you're that person that people can really rely on. And what's actually happening there is your ego is having a bit of a field day. But what's happening in reality is that often you're becoming the bottleneck for everything in your team, in your organization. Your team might start to stop thinking because they know that you'll just give them the answer, or they stop taking accountability for certain things because ultimately they know that you'll jump in, or the situation at some point will end up back on your desk or in your inbox or in your conversations with them. So, why should they need to kind of focus on it? And you end up in a situation that you often can't get the kind of high value work that only you should be doing. You can't get it done. And I definitely think, if I'm honest, I've learned this a bit of the hard way when I was managing teams across multiple different time zones, because I literally couldn't be available for every question, for every challenge, for every opportunity. And so the team that I was working with and leading, we really had to work on how we all learned to problem solve, to critically think, to be creative in how we think, how we learn to think, and how we really focus on solutions for when we come up with different situations. Because in that scenario, nothing would have got done if they were constantly waiting for me to jump in or for every decision to go through me. So that was a point in my life when I first did my coach training. So it was probably about 15 years ago. And it was all about better supporting my team when I was not necessarily always physically near them. And I've continued to develop my skills, gone through training, development to be a better coach for the teams that I contribute to and the organizations that I've worked with. And you know what happened in that process of starting to kind of not only learn the coaching skills, but start to use them? The teams that I've worked with, they become better at their jobs. People become more confident. They feel more creative in how they're problem solving. They have higher levels of accountability. And actually, that's what we all want, right? We want people in our teams who are creative problem solvers, who are able to think about how we best support the projects, the opportunities, and indeed the challenges we face as well. So, what I want to think about next is just what's the real cost of when we perhaps, sorry, I'll start that again. So, I really want to think about the real cost and what's at stake when your team does bring you every single problem, when you're constantly getting that, can I just have 5 minutes? One of the first things that I think is happening is it really affects your team's development. So when you're the one solving everything for them, people never actually get to learn how to solve things for themselves, or really critically think about all of the options that are available to them and what the best next steps are. And quite often, it's the team that you're leading that are the closest to these challenges and opportunities. And they're the people with the insight, with the knowledge that can deal with these situations. So we really need to think about how we focus on our team's development in this scenario. Because if we're the ones constantly doing it, then people aren't learning, people aren't developing. The second thing that I think is at stake, and this is a big one, is your time and your energy. It is our most precious resource, right? Our time, our energy, what we give to things, how we set up our lives, our days, our weeks, our months. That is our life, right? And it's our most precious, precious, valuable thing where we put our time and where we put our energy. So each of those quick questions, it's never just 5 minutes because it's the mental energy that you use of switching focus, of losing flow in the work that you're doing, or that deep work, like that strategic stuff, or it's the never getting to the high value work. It's a bit like, and anyone who's watched any of these, I know I'm always kind of slating email, but it is a bit like when, you're opening your emails first thing on a morning. And before you know it, you're dealing with everyone else's priorities, problems, issues, opportunities, and not the stuff that you plan to do, not the things that you deem important, high value, and the priorities that you set yourself for the day. The third thing that I think is at stake when we do, the other thing that I think is at stake when we're not spending our time helping our team become better problem solvers is actually it massively affects people's confidence and the conviction in their own decision making and things like their accountability. So you might see that in your team, people aren't taking accountability for problems, challenges, opportunities in the way that you would want them to. And often you can link that back to you being the person that's constantly stepping in and fixing things. So if your team always need your approval, they'll never get the opportunity to build confidence and conviction in their own judgment on things, because ultimately it always comes back to you. So kind of what's the point in them taking that ownership or that accountability? So really think about how the more we can build problem solving capability in our teams, the more we can ensure that people do have accountability, but also they're building their confidence around their own judgment as well. And then the fourth big issue, I think, with this problem solving piece is the bottleneck effect. Have any of you ever felt or experienced this, where everything has to go through you? And ultimately, that slows everything down, right? You're one person. You physically can't answer all the questions, make all the decisions, and do all of the approval process for every single thing that might be affecting your team, both in terms of problems and opportunities as well. And so when everything's going through you, that bottleneck effect slows everyone down, makes people less effective, and it really affects people long term in terms of stress levels. There's nothing worse when you're constantly waiting for an answer, from some information, for feedback before you can move on to the next step. So what we're going to talk about next is some of the solutions to overcome those four things that we've talked about, because they are genuinely the real cost of not focusing on building problem solving capability as a leader. So we're going to talk about what the solution is. You really need to make that big shift from telling people what to do to asking them what they think. And I know sometimes this can feel really counterintuitive, especially if you're the most experienced person about this particular problem or challenge or opportunity, or when you can see the solution. Why not just tell them? But I think what happens is when you're constantly telling someone what to do, they might follow your advice, and so there might end up be a positive outcome there. But what they don't do is learn how to think through that particular challenge or problem or opportunity themselves. And so next time, when perhaps they face something similar or another challenge, guess what? They're coming straight back to you again and again. And that's why I called this masterclass, Can I Just Have 5 Minutes? Because I think it is something that people will keep coming back to you for. When you ask them what they think might work, something different happens. As human beings, our brains then kick into action and start working through the problem, or the opportunity. People start to really kind of own what that solution could be. And even if their first, third, fourth idea isn't perfect, when you start using more of a coaching approach with your team, you can really build on those ideas with more questions, with more deep dives to help them get to a really good outcome and solution. Because in all of these conversations, we're looking for an outcome, right? We're looking for impact. And the model that I'm going to show you next is just really straightforward and simple, but it will help you start to do a bit more of this practice with your team. So when you do decide to move to a more kind of coaching style with someone, it's quite easy sometimes to get lost in that conversation. You start asking lots of different questions. They might be going around in circles on some things. And sometimes nothing gets resolved, or it takes quite a long time to get to the resolution. So what I really like about the GROW model, because in these masterclasses, we always like to share things that are really simple, really effective. You may have even come across this model before. GROW gives you what I think is just a really simple framework that can work whether you have 5 minutes with someone or whether you're having kind of a longer, more formal coaching conversation. So I'm going to just work through this model and just give you some thoughts on how you could approach it, the kind of questions you could ask to start moving your team to this more solution-focused, problem-solving way of working. So the first thing to think about is, what is the actual goal? What are we trying to achieve with this conversation? What's the outcome that we're looking for? How will we know when this problem, this challenge, or this opportunity is solved or action is taken upon? What does success look like? I think this really helps keep the conversation very focused and very purposeful on what the goal actually is. What are we trying to achieve? Because sometimes it can be very easy to just dive into what we think the problem is without spending the time really getting into the detail of what done would look like. The next part is getting into the reality of what's happening right now. So what is the current situation? What factors or issues or people or communication might be contributing to this situation? What have they tried already? This prevents you from jumping straight to the solution before truly understanding what the actual problem or opportunity is. And this really helps so that we get crystal clear on what we're actually trying to solve. And sometimes it's not what we first think it is, right? We can think, or the person comes to you with what they think is the challenge, but actually through this model, you unpick, you ask questions, you dive a bit deeper, and actually you might find that the real thing that's causing the challenge is something else. The third part is all about options. So these are your solutions. What could we do about this situation? What are all of the possible approaches that this person has? Ask that question. What are all the possible approaches they could take? What would happen if we did absolutely nothing? I think that's a great question to ask. Often we think we need to dive into action. We need to be proactive. We need to react to the situation and do something immediately. But actually, sometimes the answer could be doing nothing. Is the situation so bad that if we do nothing, something catastrophe is going to happen? Or actually, is that something that we need to do and then wait to see what the impact of that is? The other question to ask in this stage is what options actually feel most doable, most realistic to the person you're talking about? What actually can they do and take action on right now? This really helps you build their problem solving capability instead of you providing all the answers, all the solutions, all of the ways in which that they could take it forward. So digging that much deeper is really impactful. Now, the final part, and I would argue in some ways this is the kind of most important, is what is the way forward? What will we actually do? What specific actions will you take to deal with this particular problem, opportunity, situation? When will they do them? What support might they need to make that happen? This ensures that the conversation you're having actually leads to action, not just talking about the problem, not going around in circles. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those meetings. I know I have, where you're kind of dancing around the problem, we're going around in circles, talking about the same things time and time again, and getting to this point of what is the way forward? What will we do? What are the specific actions you'll take? When are you going to do them by? What support do you need? And how are you going to keep me up to date on your progress? Yeah, that final bit of agreeing actions, owners, deadlines, and most importantly, how you're going to check back in on this stuff is so, so powerful. That's what really turns this from a nice 5-minute chat to a really powerful coaching conversation. So what I want to do is just give you a quick real example of how you could potentially use this in practice. So someone might come to you and say something like, this project isn't working. Yeah. And your natural instinct as someone who wants to fix things, be a problem solver, might be to say, you need to change X, Y, and Z. But that's the old way of doing things. In that scenario, you're still solving the problem for them. But when we use grow, the question could be, to get to that goal bit, what would success look like for the project? The reality bit could be, what's not working about it all right now? What's actually happening? What are you seeing in the project? The options bit could be, how do you think we could improve it? What are some of the ways that we could address this challenge, this issue or opportunity? And then when we get into the way forward, I should have said sometimes this is called will on the grow model, is, what will you try first? When can we check in on progress on this? So immediately it's flipping the conversation to really put the emphasis back on the person that you're talking to, who you're coaching, to really start thinking through what their options are, what are the ways forward, and starting to be much more critical in their thinking and in their problem solving. In this scenario, they're the one coming up with the solutions. And even if that first idea isn't perfect, you can build on it together through you asking more questions and digging that bit deeper. One great question to just have in your back pocket is, what else? It's a great question when you're exploring options with someone. What options are available to them? Ask simply, what else? What else could you do? Keep asking it, keep exploring. And remember, when you are coaching someone, and this is ironic because anyone who joins these sessions or knows me, I'm quite a talker, but I really want to encourage you in your coaching conversations to stay quiet. Don't fill any silences. Give people the space and the time to really think and reflect on what their options might be. In these kind of coaching conversations, you actually need to be talking way, way less than the person you're coaching. You ask a great question, but then pause, give them space, and really give them a chance to think about what options might be available. People might want to go away and do some thinking and come back to you. And that's great because that shows that they're really being really thoughtful and considerate about what they do next. So give people the time to do that if they need it. And when they find the solution, even with your guidance, people remember it better. they feel more confident, they feel more empowered, and they're much, much more likely to apply that same approach, that same thinking to future problems. So it helps individuals be much more accountable for the solution and owning making it happen. And over time, if you're using this kind of tool like the Grow model with your team, people could start using it on themselves to work through some challenges, opportunities that they're facing in their role. Now, one thing I will say here, and feel free to come for me if you're a purist, but when it comes to coaching, I am not a purist. I believe that if you can help someone get to the answer quicker, it is sometimes useful to share your personal experience or your personal insight and dropping into that more mentoring mode. And this is why on this slide, we do have what we call the mentoring bridge. So sometimes whilst coaching, you might need to move into a more kind of mentoring or giving advice mode. Now, really, as you start to practice these tools, you'll start to work on your own style and approach and really get to a way of working that when to drop into those different modes. So when you're wanting to really kind of stretch your team, support your team, get them thinking and problem solving, absolutely, coaching is a great tool to use. But what I'd also love you to think about is when it's appropriate to drop into mentoring. Maybe you've got the exact same experience as this person and the problem or the opportunity they're working through. And so actually it would be rather unfair not to share some of that insight with them that could help them get to a better solution, maybe to it quicker and have a better outcome. So you really have to think about how you use your different leadership styles and approaches, depending on the situation, depending on the person. Now, before you start going off merrily coaching everyone, which hopefully using something like the Grow tool, you can start thinking about what that looks like for you. I want you to understand something crucial about how people learn and grow. So I want you to think of these 3 zones when you are coaching, developing, mentoring your team. So the first one I want you to think about is just the comfort zone. Yeah, this is our kind of warm, fluffy space where people feel very safe. They feel quite confident here. They feel that they know what they're doing. They are comfortable with the work that they're doing. They understand what's expected of them. And they're kind of just going through what they know they need to do. Yeah, people feel very safe in this place. There's often very little growth happening or change happening in this space because we're just comfortable, right? We're doing what we know. We're doing what we know best. Now, the stretch zone, I think this is where the magic happens. So it's challenging enough to promote growth and to get people learning and experiencing new things and doing new things and new ways of working, trying things, experimenting, innovating. But it's not so overwhelming that people shut down. So this is where you want your coaching to really take people. You want to take people in to their stretch zone. Now, the panic zone is one to be aware of because this is where people can feel very overwhelmed. They maybe feel a bit out of their depth. And when people are in kind of panic mode and panic zone, we can't actually learn when we're in that space because our brains start to protect ourselves. Yeah. We feel uncomfortable. We feel out of our depth. There's some fear there. And so our brain goes into survival mode. And what we want to ensure is that for people's well-being, for people's stress levels, that they're not going into their panic zone. Yeah. We want to, your role really as a coach and as a leader is to stretch people, help them to stretch into that zone without going into panic mode and panic zone. Now, I think you can gauge a little bit about where people are. You'll know your team, you'll have good relationships with them, you'll have spent that time getting to know them, and you can gauge which zone they're in by asking some quite simple questions. How are they feeling about this particular project or challenge that they're facing? What support might they need from you as their leader to help them feel more confident, more comfortable, more able to handle the situation? You could even ask someone, I know a great leader in a engineering firm that, one question that's really worked for them that we've worked on with them and their team when they went through this kind of culture transformation and moving to much more feedback and problem solving way of working was, simply asking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stretched do you feel right now? It really helps you gauge what support your team might need from you and where they are in these different zones. And it will help you think about the tools, the techniques, the questions you ask, and the support that you can give them. I know this is a whistle-stop tour in these masterclasses, but if anyone does want to do a deeper dive on these conversations, please do reach out and drop me a message, because we love talking about this stuff, and we were very happy to answer any specific questions you have about some of these challenges. So the final thing I want to touch on when we're thinking about this moving to being more problem solvers rather than problem bringers, it's about decision-making boundaries. So you need to get clear on what these are. What actually needs your input versus what doesn't. So have that conversation with your team about what decisions they can make independently, decisions that they absolutely should consult you on, and the decisions that only you can make. So, for example, in your organization, you maybe have a thing where you can approve expenses under £500 without asking me. For anything over that, maybe it's just you want them to give you a heads up. And for any kind of more significant budget changes, so say there's a spend that's over £5,000, it might be that you want them to discuss that properly with you. Maybe there's a certain level where they need to put a business case together. So really think about what those clear boundaries are for you and your team, because the clearer the boundaries are, it means that there's fewer interruptions for you, and your team are more accountable for the decisions that they make. So think about it in your own team, your own organization. Are there any kind of key questions, key themes, or decision points that your team are frequently coming to you for? Frequently needing you to discuss with them? Think about what those are for you and set some boundaries around what they look like. This will make it much smoother for everyone. It's going to be more efficient, more productive, and everyone's going to get so much more time back. That's what we all want. Remember, most precious resources are our time and our energy and what we're giving those to. So to do all this, you really need to, if we've got those great boundaries, we've had that conversation, people are super clear on what decision-making power they have, you're coaching your team so that when they are coming to problems, you're helping them work through it, but you're not giving them all the answers. The next thing you really need to think about to truly get that culture in your team of problem solvers is you want to create safety. Safety for your team to think, to experiment, and to make mistakes. So if every time someone in your team makes a decision without you, and they then get questioned or criticized or embarrassed in front of the team about that decision, guess what? They'll stop making decisions. They'll stop experimenting. They'll stop trying to solve things for themselves. So be explicit, be super clear with your team about what experimentation looks like for you. So, you could say something simply like, I'd rather you made a decision and get it kind of 80% right than not make a decision at all. We can always change things. We can always change course. We can always improve things. but really you want to encourage your team to experiment, encourage new ideas, innovation, getting them to pilot stuff, experiment, support your team to take that fear away from getting it wrong. And that's your job as a leader, to create that safe environment where people absolutely feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued, but they also know it's safe to make mistakes. Be explicit. Say that out loud. Keep repeating it to your team. Keep sharing with your team anything that you're making mistakes on, any fuck ups that you've got. Be vulnerable, share those with your team so they start to know and trust that it's safe to experiment. It's safe to have an idea. It's safe to try something and fail and nothing bad happens. Yeah. That is your job as a leader, to create that safe environment where mistakes can happen. We can experiment. That is the only time you will get true problem solving and true innovation in your team, when people feel safe enough to fail. So here's what I want you to remember from our masterclass today. I told you it'd be a whistle stop tour. So we've had 35 minutes together. Can you believe it? The time does fly. But here's just what I want you to remember, that, being everyone's go-to person, it's actually not helping anyone to grow. It creates dependency, and it's often exhausting, stressing out, or burning out your team. Yeah. Now, the beauty of the simple grow model that I shared is that it is really flexible. So, like I said, it works for those 5-minute quick corridor conversations or quick Teams calls, or it works in those more formal coaching moments as well. It's memorable, it's empowering, and it always ends with clear next steps. That is the purpose of a coaching conversation. Now, the trick is the follow-up. Agree deadlines, agree actions, agree owners. So you've got that kind of comfort that the team are really taking accountability and owning it, and they're really clear on what the expectations are. So start asking more and telling less. Try some of those questions that we've talked about today. So things like, what options do you see for moving forward? What would you do if you had absolutely no constraints? Ask them if they're advising a colleague or the team member in this situation, what would they suggest to them? And most importantly, set those clear decision-making boundaries so that people know what they can handle themselves without needing to get you involved, and create that safety for people to think and to make mistakes, and to know that it's okay to do that. Nothing terrible is going to happen. We're all human. We all fail. We all make mistakes. That is an amazing learning opportunity when we do. So the goal here isn't to be less supportive of your team. It's to support your team in a way that actually develops them. So go and try it just for a week. I know we're getting to the end of the year, but there's a few days left. Or maybe if you've already broken up for the holidays, then, explore this in January. But try it for just 1 week. Instead of answering that next, can I have 5 minutes, or what should I do question, use the grow model. See what happens. Focus on great questions rather than telling people what the answers are. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found this useful, and I'd really love to hear from you how you're getting on with trying the grow model with your team, from trying some of these questions. It's simple, it's effective, and that's what these masterclasses are all about. If you'd like to keep in touch, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. There's also our mailing list here, which gives you access to our newsletter, and we're launching something very exciting in January. So if you are interested in being a founding member and getting access to a leadership community, workshops, coaching, and a whole raft of incredible expert speakers and resources, in return for some feedback from you on what we could improve, what we could do differently, drop me a message, because if you or one of your team would like to join us, we've got one place left, and it would be amazing to have someone like you, giving us that support, that feedback, people who love learning. We've created something. We've been running it for 2 years with different clients, and we're now going to take it to the public. So we'd love your thoughts and feedback on that. And in return, we will give you free access. So drop me a message if that might be of interest to you. And I hope you have a wonderful end to the year. Thank you so much for joining the masterclasses. We've loved having you here, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.